Hi, my name's Mupai and I hope you're having a fantastic day. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the Dutch in treaty and we'll be covering three primary topics. We'll firstly be taking a look at some of the unique characteristics of the Dutch. We'll then be taking a look at a typical treaty deck, and finally, we'll be taking a look at a full 40-minute boom. First, let's get started with some of the unique characteristics of the Dutch. The first thing we're going to take a look at is that the Dutch economy is limited to 55 villages. Now they can produce 50 of these from town centres and 5 of them are from an age up option for going to the fourth age. Now there are a number of positives and negatives associated with having such a small villager economy. Firstly, by having 55 villages, this means that the number of mills and estates that you're going to have to make is going to be smaller than a typical economy. This means that you have a smaller base, which makes it easier to keep it nice and compact and wall in appropriately. Another point is that you're having to spend less resources on villages. Additionally, because you only have a 55 villager economy, it means that your army can be 145 population. Finally, by being limited to 55 villages, this means that on water maps, you're able to maintain fishing boats past 40 minutes easier than some other civilizations. But by having a 55 villager economy, the most significant negative associated with this is that you're obviously producing less resources long term. Additionally, the Dutch villager costs gold, which is gathered slower than food. To somewhat counteract the effects of Dutch villagers costing gold, they gather gold from mines at 15% faster than other civilizations. This gives them a base gather rate of 0.69 coin per second. In order to maintain a constant production of villages, you can either go for 4 villages on a mine and rely on the RNG of treasures, or go for 5 villages on the mine. Let's take a quick look at the maths behind that. Firstly, villages will typically take 25 seconds to train, and with a base gather rate of 0.69 coin per second, this means that 4 villages will take 36 seconds to gather 100 coin. On the other hand, 5 villages will take 29 seconds to gather 100 coin. Taking into account the 400 coin start, which gives you 3 villages costing 300 coin, hunting dogs, which costs 50 coin and 50 wood, and then 50 leftover coin. This means that to get the first 100 coin will take you 18 seconds with 4 villages and 15 seconds with 5 villages. Now with 3 villages queued from that 300 starting coin, this will give you 75 seconds of villager queue time, where you're able to gather coin. After the first 50 coin is mined, to give you the 100 coin with a 50 coin left over from the start, this will give you a queue time of 82 seconds with 4 villages and 86 seconds with 5 villages, the higher number being better. With 4 villages, every time you queue a villager, which will take 36 seconds, you're losing 11 seconds of queue time. This means that after 7.5 villages being produced, you will have downtime of no villages being produced at all, which is obviously not ideal. On the other hand, with 5 villages, you lose 4 seconds per villager queued, meaning it'll take 21.5 villages until you have a downtime of no villages being produced. Using 4 villages makes you reliant on gold treasures, which is risky. It is much safer to put 5 villages onto mines until you get a bank, which is effectively the equivalent of 4 villages gathering from a mine. After making one bank, it is safe to take 3 villages off the mine and leave 2 on. Now you heard me mention a bank, but what exactly is a bank? Well, a bank is a building only available to the Dutch, and as I previously mentioned, produces coin passively. Now the bank costs 350 wood and 350 food, and produces 2.75 coin per second. Now, the banks take an absolute age to build, so when you build them, you ideally want to have 4 villages making it. Now, by default, the Dutch can build 5 banks, and through tech available in the home city, the church, and the capital, they can increase this number to 11. Now, through another card that's available through the home city, they can increase the gather rate of banks by 20%, which basically means the banks are producing 3.3 gold per second. When compared to a fully upgraded estate, which one villager gathers 1.5 gold per second, this equates to 11 banks being the equivalent of 24.2 villages, which basically means that a Dutch economy has 79 villages, which obviously still pales in comparison to effectively every other civilization when it comes to resources gathered. Now, speaking of unique things only available to the Dutch also have two units that are only available to them. The first of these is the Envoy, which is their equivalent of the Scout. Now, you get one of these when you start the game, and you can use it to explore the map around you to try and find treasures and natural resources. Now, whilst they have similar stats to a Scout, they're very much inferior because the main thing that a Scout is supposed to do is to scout. And whilst the move speed difference doesn't seem like a great deal, when you're trying to cover as much of the map as quickly as possible, that difference of 1.5 move speed can be the difference between getting a really important treasure and not. Now, the second unit that is available to the Dutch and not available to any other civilization is the Reuter. Now, the Reuter is the Dutch's light cavalry and is used to take out cavalry. Now, the closest unit to this is the Dragoon, but you'll quickly notice that the Dragoon is better in every single aspect. So why would you ever want a Reuter? Well, interestingly, a Dragoon costs 2 population, whilst a Reuter costs 1, which means you can have a whole lot more Reuters than you can Dragoons. So, whilst the Reuters attack of 29 pales in comparison to the Dragoon's attack of 46, when you multiply that by 2, you have an attack of 58. The same can be said for the health, where multiplied by 2, they have a HP pool of 588. Now that's fantastic, but you also need to take into consideration the costs of these units. Where a Dragoon costs 90 food and 90 coin, a Reuter costs 30 food and 75 coin. This basically represents resource costs of 180 versus 105. This means that although a Reuter is cheaper than a Dragoon, 2 Reuters cost more resources than it costs to build 1 Dragoon. So even though you're getting for the same pop space more attack and more HP, you're spending more resources to do that. And for the Dutch economy, which already is inferior to effectively every other economy in the game, you have to be very careful because otherwise you're going to run out of resources. Another thing that is worth noting is that the range resistance of a Dragoon is 20%, which is obviously twice as good as the Reuters range resist of 10. Now, I'm not going to go down into the absolute exact differences and similarities between these two units to determine which is categorically a better unit, but they effectively work as the same thing. Now that we've had a look at some of the unique aspects that set the Dutch apart from the other civilizations, we're now going to go and take a look at a typical treaty deck. We'll now be taking a look at a deck that you'll typically use when playing Treaty. Now you'll recognize a number of these cards, but just for a general overview, we'll be going through the send order of these cards and then talking about each of them. So firstly, you'll be sending your Food Trickle card because the sooner you get this card out, obviously, the more resources you'll gain over time. And this is an extremely important card for allowing you to build your banks sooner rather than later. After you've sent your Food Trickle, that's when you'll send both of these cards, which increase your bank cap by 1. After that, you'll be sending your unique Church Tech, which further increases the build limit of your banks by 2. Additionally, this card will allow you to gain access to 2 separate shipments of military units, which will allow you to overpop. Now, I won't go into the specifics of these units, but you'll see me use them to overpop in the boom guide that follows. After you've got your unique tech card, that's when you'll get your Royal Mint card, followed by both of your factories, and the Tulip card, which increases the gather rate of your banks by 20%. After you've got the Tulip card, this is when you'll typically send your Mercantilism card from the church, and then you'll get 1, 2, 3, all of which obviously increase the gather rate from estates. Now notice that we haven't sent any of the food gathering cards. That is because we make use of South Sea Bubble, where all of our current coin is exchanged for a greater amount of wood. Now you'll see me do this in the boom guide, but you'll put all of your villages onto coin and have your factories on food. Now, because the Dutch military is so dependent on coin, having your factories on food is generally enough food for you to be able to sustain yourself until you've got these upgrades after the 40-minute treaty has ended. After you've got your estate cards, that's when you'll typically save a card for your South Sea bubble, which generally speaking you'll send when you hit 27,000 coin. Now, if you're playing natives, you might wait a little bit longer because that'll mean you'll have some more wood. You'll obviously want to be doing this because natives typically cost a lot of wood. After that, you'll be sending your advanced arsenal and then your train speed reduction cards. After that, that's when you'll typically send your food gather rate increases and then you'll start transitioning your villages from the estates to the mills. Now, this obviously takes a little bit more micromanagement than you'd typically be used to, but it's definitely the most efficient way to gather food. After that, you can basically pick and choose from the remaining text depending on what you're versing. Typically, I'll send the HP and damage increase cards, followed by the further HP increase, and then I'll pick and choose any of the remaining cards. Now, taking a look at the Nats deck, it's very similar, except we also have this card and this card, which obviously enhance our capacity and our team's capacity to build and make use of Nats. Furthermore, you have the water deck, where I might actually take out South Sea Bubble and put in exotic hardwoods instead. But because the treaty map pool doesn't really include water decks, I've not actually used the Dutch a whole lot on water. Now, a lot of people actually like to include this mortar card, which obviously increases the damage of mortars for your team by 20%. Now, this might sound great, but it's actually not that relevant because the benefit it actually provides is fairly meaningless. Where the value the card actually provides is simply not good enough to replace any of these other cards, which are much more effective at allowing you to play Dutch at a higher level. But this is obviously only my interpretation of how to play the Dutch, so feel free to use whatever cards you like. But that pretty much sums it up for an overview of a typical Dutch treaty deck. So now we're actually going to be taking a look at a boom. So to begin, you obviously want to collect all your starting resources and move your envoy and your explorer around to A, figure out where all the treasures are, oh, as well as establishing where the natural resources are, which we're using to expand into. Now, as the Dutch villages cost coin,
Ja. Commando handelaar. Hallo. Oké. Ja. Ik ga. Oké. Houthakker. Klaar. Ja. Houthakker.
as the Dutch villages actually cost coin to produce, you want to ensure that you're maintaining at least 4 villages on a coin to allow you to maintain production of villages. Now, another way that the Dutch actually are able to produce coin is through banks, which is a unique building only available to them. Now, to basically produce these banks, you need 350 wood and 350 food. And you want to try and get these banks as soon as possible. So before we actually age up to the second age, we're going to try and get 3 banks down. Now, this will typically correlate with 22 villages. So our age 2 will be a bit slower than others, but doing this will basically allow us to go straight to the third age. Now, obviously, the coin treasures are not so relevant for the Dutch just because they have the banks, but obviously you want to be getting as many resources as you can get. So deck-wise, on this particular map, we typically pick the natives deck, but because this is a beginner guide to the Dutch, we're going to be using this one. So the first card you want to be getting is this one, which gives you a food trickle, which is obviously great for building up resources over time. And during this, you're obviously wanting to explore with your explorer and your envoy for the aforementioned reason of mainly just looking for treasures which you can use. Now we're a little bit heavy on wood here.
Handelaar.
So we just put that villager onto food.
Klaar.
But when this food trigger comes in, that basically counts as 1.5 villagers.
Ja? Ja, juist.
So Andy's typically has pretty bad treasures on it, resource-wise, but that's okay. So obviously what we're trying to do right now is get 350 food and 350 wood. And we're going to be doing that 3 times before we age up.
Klaar. Ook juist. Jager. Jager.
I'm just looking to herd the hunts around the TC just so there's less travel time for the villagers.
Commando. Oké.
Klaar. Commando? Oké. Ja.
So we're getting pretty close to our first bank now. And basically when we get enough resources, we're actually going to put 4 villages on it because banks take an absolute age to build. And we're going to be using 4 villagers who are cutting wood.
Ja. Juist. Houthakker.
And after we've built the bank, we're actually able to take 2 villagers off of the coin mine just because the bank provides more than enough coin. Where currently, 1 villager is producing 0.69 coin per second, and the bank provides 2.75, which is obviously a fair bit greater than those 2 villagers. Now the second and third cards we'll be sending are these 2 bank increase cards.
Ja.
We'll take 2 villagers off here.
Ja? Ja.
Commando. Oké. Ik ga.
Commando?
An important... Excuse me. An important thing to remember though is that you don't want your explorer wandering too far away from your base as you age up to 3, because as you're using a fast age, you're wanting to build your town centers as soon as possible.
Ja.
So
Ja.
we're actually going to start herding these guys back because they're going for a bit of a wander.
Klaar. Jager. Hallo.
Got
Ik
too
ga.
much food here.
Klaar. Ik doe het.
Commando? Klaar.
So just keep them close-ish by. Sorry, bounced a little bit too much, but that's okay. Another important consideration
Ja.
is that obviously as we're going to be going to 22 villages, that basically means that we're going to have to build a house,
Hallo.
which we'll be doing momentarily. Looks like, oh no, we'll be fine.
Ja.
We'll be fine.
Ja. Houthakker.
Klaar. Ja?
Hallo. Oké. Klaar. Ik ga. Houthakker.
When we build this bank, we can basically take these 2 villages off
Commando? Ja?
and then put them back onto wood.
Commando?
Grab our second bank increase.
Klaar. Ja?
Ja. Oh, ja.
Klaar. Juist.
But things are going not too bad right now. We actually forgot to take our villagers off,
Klaar.
but that's okay.
Commando. Jager. Jager.
Ja? Commando? Ook ja.
So you might actually go for 4 banks aging up here. So typically after you have enough wood for the 3rd one, you'll take all villagers off and chuck them onto food. But what we're actually going to do is keep some village. We're going to take most of the villagers off, but leave some villagers on just to allow us to get another bank.
Ja, ik doe het. Timmerman. Houthakker.
Hallo. Ja. Oké. Commando. Jager. Klaar. Ja. Commando. Jager. Ja.
Commando. Jager.
Commando.
I don't know why they're standing there.
Hallo. Houthakker.
Klaar. Juist. Houthakker.
So this gives us 22 villagers.
Commando. Jager.
She might be going for 23 villagers here actually.
Commando? Klaar. Ja?
We'll start taking our explorer back because there's actually not really many treasures
Juist.
that are useful for us. And we'll next be getting the card. We'll be getting this one. We'll be getting the Royal Mint card. Yes, we're going for 23 villagers here.
Klaar. Commando. Ja.
Ja.
Ja. Juist.
Hallo. Jager.
Commando. Jager.
Commando. Klaar.
And now we have 350 wood. We're just going to chuck our villagers onto food here.
Ja. Ik ga. Juist. Jager.
Ja. Commando.
And they're about to be
Ja, ik-
herded
ja, oké.
badly, so we're...
Jager. Jager. Hallo.
Yep.
Ja. Hallo. Command. Ja.
Yep.
Jager. Klaar. Juist.
So we'll start herding these guys down.
Ja. Juist. Oké.
Command. Ik ga.
Commando. Oké.
So now we're obviously looking to get 1.2k food and 1k coin. 1k coin is obviously going to be happening, and they've been herded really badly again, which is not ideal at all.
Hallo. Houthakker. Juist. Jager.
So based on this travel time, we might not actually be able to get... and they did it again.
Hallo.
It's going to be
Jager.
pretty
Jager.
tight, I feel. No, it should be... No, we'll be fine. We'll be fine for 1.2k food, but yeah.
Commando.
This has been done pretty badly.
Ja.
So if you're not understanding what herding is, I'd recommend checking out my
Jager.
beginner's guide treaty video that goes into this sort of detail. Yep, so we'll go straight up to 3.
Ja. Houthakker. Houthakker.
Hallo. Oké.
Klaar. Houthakker.
Klaar.
We'll look to get log flumes here just to increase the gather rate of wood.
Klaar. Ja. Ja.
Klaar. Ja.
Because we're looking to put 2 town centers down as soon as we age, basically.
Hallo.
We'll use this guy to keep herding for us. I'm also looking to get steel traps, but after we've put down our 2 town centers. So I'll probably look to put one around here, have one here maybe, because there's not really any food on this side, so this side's sort of irrelevant for us.
Commando. Ja. Juist. Ook juist. Oké.
Commando. Houthakker.
Klaar.
I thought I
Ja.
queued them up. How far out can we go?
Juist.
We'll chuck you here. And then we'll use
Ja. Commando.
5 villages to actually build another town center out over here, which will then get our explorer to come and build on
Ja, oké. Ik ga.
when he's
oké.
finished that.
Juist.
So now what we're looking to try and do... Oh, we should have actually queued villages, that was really bad of us. We'll get both of these now.
Klaar. Jager.
Ja. Jager.
Now you'll notice with the age up here that we can get a 5 cellar and chest of 400 coin. Now basically what you're able to do is you're able to basically max out your villages, and then you're able to get that, and it gives you a 55 villager economy, which is obviously extremely important. That extra 10% villages obviously makes a massive difference in the resources you're able to gather. So what we're trying to do now is we're trying to balance
Oké. Houthakker.
the number. We're trying to get as many banks as we can, which is 9, as well as hitting the max number of villages that we can in the 3rd age. So again, we're a little bit delayed in going to the 4th age, but we're basically able to fast forward, go to the 5th age, basically as soon as we hit the 4th, generally speaking.
Hallo. Timmerman. Houthakker.
So again, we're looking to balance our resources.
Klaar. Ja.
Hallo. Jager. Houthakker. Ik. Ja. Ja.
So we'll herd these guys towards this one and herd these ones towards this other TC. Just make it a little bit easier for ourselves.
Commando. Juist. Oké. Ja.
Ja. Hallo. Oh, juist. Jager.
We'll get steel traps here. And then we'll look to chuck down our next
Commando.
bank.
Houthakker. Ja. Timmerman. Houthakker.
We're also going to put our church down because one of the cards we got, our unique church deck, basically increases our church limit by 2, which is obviously ideal. So we'll chuck that down now.
Timmerman. Houthakker. Ja. Hallo. Timmerman. Houthakker. Klaar.
Ja. Houthakker. Klaar. Houthakker.
Ja. Commando. Juist.
Ja. Commando. Houthakker.
So we can nearly build another one. So basically just wanted to max out our villages. So we can chuck down another bank. Unfortunately, we can't build it here, so we're not going to have a nice little box of them. That's okay. So this is the tech that we're wanting. It increases the bank limit by 2. But unfortunately, it reduces move speed of all units by 10%. but that's worth it in the long run. Now we're going to be saving this, the next home city shipment, for the 2 factories and the tulip speculation, because that obviously increases the gather rate of the banks by 15%. So now we're capped on villages, which is great, and we're on to our last bank after this one, and then we'll look to age the 4th age.
Ja? Ook ja.
Klaar. Hallo, houthakker.
So we actually need a bit more food.
Klaar. Ik
So
doe
we actually take
het.
everyone off wood now and chuck them onto food because we have enough wood.
Commando. Ja. Timmerman. Jager. Commando. Jager. Klaar. Jager.
Commando. Jagen. Ja.
We have one
Commando.
person still on
Okay.
wood, which is not
Jager.
ideal.
Commando.
Yeah, so we might actually buy food here. Generally not advised, but we messed up a little bit with our resource distributions there. We obviously need 1.2k food, so we'll also buy our way to victory. So there we go.
Klaar. Juist.
So we'll get that going, because obviously we want to age as quickly as possible because we want to get our factories as well as the 5 additional explorers.
Handelaar.
Now, for going to the next stage, you'll typically want
Klaar.
approximately 8 to 10 villages on a coin mine, and all of your other villages on food. You also want to get placer mines at this point, just to give your guys a little bit of a boost on the coin mine.
Juist.
This will almost allow you to go to the 5th age immediately, but at this point there's probably going to be a little bit of delay, but that's fine. That's somewhat expected. We messed up a little bit.
Jager.
We can manage. So again, obviously right now we're just trying to get 4k food and 4k coin. So obviously all these banks are producing a fair amount of coin, which is why we have most villages on food and only a couple on coin. Obviously with the 4th age up, we also get 500 coin, which gives us a little bit of a buffer just to get that extra coin we need to get to the 5th age.
Hallo. Ja.
So we're actually going to run out of food there, which is definitely not ideal.
Ja. Juist. Ja. Ook ja. Ook juist. Juist.
So
Ja,
we'll
oké.
herd these
Ja,
guys
juist.
back
Ja.
in.
Ja, ik doe het.
It'll be pretty close. So we'll just chuck our home city shipment item here, just so when the villagers spawn, they just jump on the crates straight away, and we'll send in our factories. Now we can send our
Commando.
gather
Hallo,
point
oké.
there.
Klaar. Commando.
We'll chuck these
houthakker.
guys on wood right now
Hello,
because we
houthakker.
have enough food. And then we're close, so we're actually going to sell a bit, and then we'll look to age up straight away.
Klaar. Houthakker.
And there we go.
Commando.
We'll take all the
houthakker.
villagers off coin here.
Commando?
We'll leave these guys on
Yeah.
food, because when we age up, we're obviously going to be looking to get the capital and the associated upgrades in that. Now, usually you'll be going for the deforestation upgrade,
Ik ga.
but for us, we're actually going to be going for the coin up because that increases the number of banks we can have by 2. So we'll be going for the coin one, and then we'll be going for deforestation.
Ja? Ja.
Now, typically with factories, you'll put them onto wood, but in our case, we're actually going to be putting them on food.
Commando.
Oh,
Hello,
yeah, 4 villagers not
houthakker.
doing anything. These guys are about to be done as well.
Houthakker.
How much is left in that? 90.
Houthakker. Klaar. Oké.
Ja? Juist.
So generally speaking, being able to age up before the 5th age, sorry, being able to age up before 20 minutes is ideal. But you obviously want to get that as low as possible because as soon as you can get your capital, the better. So we're just gonna move our guys here to build the capital for us.
Ik ga. Houthakker. Hallo.
Ja,
We'll
ik
gather
doe
our
het.
coin.
Klaar. Ook ja.
Now we got our tulip card, which increases the gather rate of the banks by 50%. And we'll get our coin upgrade and then our deforestation.
Commando.
Hallo? Ja, juist.
Now when that card comes in, we're obviously going to have to build our 2 banks as soon as possible just to get that extra coin coming in. So we'll get our 4 villagers ready to go, and we'll just chuck them on the side here.
Oké, ik juist. Oh, ik ga. Ja, oké. Houthakker.
And now what we're going to do is actually going to chuck down a whole heap of estates. Now, with the Dutch, they get access to South Sea Bubble, which basically exchanges all their coin for a larger amount of wood. Now we're going to use that and basically put all our villagers onto coin.
Ja, oké. Ja, houthakker.
You can get a couple other upgrades as well. Don't bother getting large-scale agriculture until a bit later, because we're actually not going to be using mills until post 40 minutes. So this is part of the reason why our factories are on...
Houthakker. Hello.
Chuck the guys onto wood.
Yeah. Houthakker.
That is part of the reason why our factories are on food, because we're not actually going to be gathering coin.
Commando? Oké. Juist. Ja, houthakker.
We're not actually going to be gathering coin from... food from the mills. Which is not necessarily a big problem, because the Dutch are generally heavily reliant on coin rather than food. So we're going to be looking to sending all our estate upgrades and leave all of our mill upgrades until later. So we're not going to be transitioning onto estates until we have the upgrades, because it's currently not efficient to be gathering from them.
Ja, commando. Ik ga. Houthakker. Houthakker. Hallo? Handelaar. Ja.
Now, despite only having a 55 villager economy, this also means that because you have less villagers, it means you have less crap everywhere, which means you can have a nice compact base, which is obviously fantastic, especially in 1v1s, where the map space is sometimes very, very small. Now we're just waiting on these couple upgrades to come in, and then we'll start transitioning all of our villagers. We actually might start transitioning now, because we actually have a fair bit of wood.
Handelaar.
So we're doing 7 villages per one,
Ja. Handelaar. Commando.
which means we're going to need 8 plantations
Timmerman.
to house everybody.
Hello. Timmerman.
So how many is that? 2, 4, 7?
Commando? Juist.
Commando.
Klaar. Handelaar.
So 3, we need 4.
Klaar. Ik doe het. Handelaar.
Commando? Ja. Commando? Klaar. Hallo? Handelaar.
7,
Klaar. Commando? Handelaar.
7,
Commando. Ja. Handelaar.
6, 7,
Hallo. Ja. Timmerman. Klaar.
3.
Timmerman.
Commando? Oké.
Where is the
Hallo.
other one?
Juist. Timmerman.
You can come over here. So obviously have a bit of a surplus of wood right now,
Juist. Handelaar.
so we can look to build some other things. So obviously houses are fantastic to build, even though we already have a 150 population cap because of the
Klaar. Oké. Juist.
the capital card.
Timmerman.
But they're great for XP, which allows you to get a few more shipments. Or get your shipments a bit earlier.
Ja. Oké. Ik ga. Handelaar.
Ja. Timmerman. Timmerman. Handelaar. Commando. Timmerman.
So there we go, we're capped on houses now. And now you can see our little civilization is starting to come to light.
Ja? Ja.
Hallo. Juist.
Now we'll be trading when we have approximately 27k wood. Now if you're actually playing natives, then you'll typically go a little bit later because natives are obviously a little bit heavier on wood. But for the purposes of today's video, we'll be trading at around 27,000, which will mean by the time the trade comes in, we'll have about 30,000 coin. But obviously, we're going to be saving this home city shipment for the South Sea Bubble, because so many times I've forgotten about it and then ended up with 40, 50,000 coin, which is not ideal at all. Now, obviously, you want to be getting the Explorer HP card upgrades, or the Explorer HP card upgrades, which I've explained a couple times before, but your Explorer is an absolutely essential component of your army, because with the upgrades, he has 3,000 HP, which makes him extremely cost effective for how much he actually costs. which is only a small amount of coin. So now it's basically just waiting. So we have a little bit to go, but it shouldn't take too long. Now, normally at this point, you would actually be building your FB or your base. You'll be building up your base in general. So you'll have to be a little bit faster than you otherwise might be, but it's not generally that difficult. So waiting a bit longer. And obviously another really important consideration for the Dutch is that because you have 55 villages, that means you can have a bigger army where you have 145 pop space to actually have military units, which allows you to typically overwhelm your opponent in the initial start fight. So it's important to have a good combination of units to help counter what your opponent might be throwing at you. And generally speaking, a good score for Dutch is around the 200,000 or 2k mark. Now, depending if you have boats or depending on the trades going on your team, this might be higher or lower. But generally speaking, if you're able to hit around the 1.9 to 2k mark, then you've generally done your job all right. So we're getting pretty close to the trade mark, or sorry, the trade amount, which is around 27,000 coin. So we'll be sending that in a moment. And there we go. We're actually going to turn my camera around now, just so it makes it a little bit easier for building our forward base here. So the only issue with trading for wood is that you're actually not cutting this wood, and all these trees are a pain in the ass for having to build your base around. So if you're in a team game, it's generally you can generally ask your teammates to help you out and get rid of all your trees, because having to build around that can really limit your ability to fight around them. So you notice that we have around 30k now, so we have a little bit more.
Yeah.
So when we actually trade, we're actually going to chuck down a couple of buildings here. How far can we build out?
Timmerman.
Like so.
Ja. Timmerman. 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 Commando. Timmerman.
That's pretty bad, actually. And also remember to get all your foundry upgrades.
Commando.
What we're actually going to do now is we're going to put down a couple of mills.
Timmerman. Handelaar.
Klaar. Ja, handelaar.
And look to get the upgrades. How far out can we build here? That's fine. I'm also obviously look to send our advanced arsenals on next card.
Okay.
Juist.
And this is obviously when we're looking to get all the upgrades. And now we'll start building a wall, because walls are important. So again, that's a bad wall. Oops.
Commando.
So again, the trees are going to be problematic, but you're just going to have to deal with them, unfortunately.
Ja. Houthakker.
Right, don't cut wood, we have too much wood. You can sometimes obviously use the trees as the wall, but units will typically be able to run around the trees and then get into your base and kill your dudes, which is obviously not ideal at all. We'll hotkey all our buildings here.
Hello.
Ja.
Who's supposed to be building this? You? You.
Klaar. Ja.
So you can stop building.
Handelaar. Ja.
And you can stop building. We'll actually get another wall built now. So we have 11 minutes left. It's always important to keep an eye on the clock, just to ensure that you know that you are on track with what you should be doing, which is obviously setting your base up, because there's nothing worse than realizing you only have a couple minutes left in the treaty and you don't have a base built out. Because then you start panicking and everything goes out the window and you lose. Which is obviously not ideal when you spent 40 minutes building up your beautiful economy and base. Oop. And if you don't understand why I'm doing the pillars, I'll actually link you to my my walling video, which just goes into a little more detail about why you actually should be deleting the pillars. So you don't necessarily run out of gold, but that's okay because we have all our villagers on coin right now. I shift clicked, no. Whoops. So now we'll send our advanced arsenal, and we'll also upgrade our mills.
Commando. Timmerman. Handelaar.
So although the Dutch are heavily reliant on coin, you will run out of food if you do not transition your villages across. You simply cannot rely on your factories to give you enough food. And a number of times I've just not been paying attention, and then all of a sudden I have 0 food and 60k coin. And then you have to desperately try and rebalance your economy, and typically trade in the market, which is generally not very cost effective.
Commando. Hallo. Juist.
So actually we won't get him to build a wall. We'll get this guy to finish off this.
Ja, oké. Juist. Ja, juist. Juist.
So again, normally in this case, we'd actually be going for gnats, so we typically be fighting here as well as over here. But just for the purposes of today, I'll just be putting my army here, just to show you a typical unit composition. So I think we needed one more horse. Yeah. Now, an interesting thing about the Dutch cavalry is that the Reuter actually only costs 1 population. So you're able to pump out a whole lot more of these guys than other cavalry, which typically costs 2 population space. Advanced arsenal, so make sure you get these upgrades as well. So often I've forgotten about them, which is not ideal. Now again, we're typically going for legendary native warriors upgrade. Actually, we will, because we actually have the native the gnats in our deck. So we'll get him to finish off the wall.
Commando. Klaar. Ja,
And we'll get him to build another wall.
Houthakker.
No, don't cut that.
Juist. Oké.
Oh dear. So we'll typically go 4 layers deep of walls, but depending on the opposition and how much base space you have, you might go more or you might be forced to go less. Where maps like Yukon and a couple of other notable examples are really crap for walls and make me want to uninstall the game. But obviously trees are annoying to deal with because you have to go around them or use them as the walls, which is obviously not ideal.
Hello.
I'm actually going to chuck a tower here as well and upgrade that. Make sure we have an upgrade, yep. So we're going to build a few more halberdiers as well. So I obviously put my culls in a control group there. If you don't understand why I'm doing that, then I recommend checking out my beginner's guide to treaty because it explains details like that. We may as well grab this. Dude, what a disaster. I'm just not getting the walls today, man. Okay, I don't know why you guys are in that. So we'll send our training speed now. And after that, that's when we'll look to send our gather rates for the mill. You better now, yep. So look to go 4 layers deep here. You'll notice we still have a fair chunk of wood left over. Now we'll actually be using that for our forward base and walling a bit later on. So again, it's extremely important to keep an eye on this, because if you suddenly realize you have 0 wood when you need to build cannons or you need to build an FB,
Ja, ik ga.
things can go bad very quickly. So now that we're fully capped, we're actually going to send our unique church tech, which again, if you don't understand, I'd recommend checking out my beginner guide to treaty. And also send our militiamen. And we'll send in our envoys. And then we'll look to set up our army, and then we'll see what we do. So we have 5 minutes left now. So time is definitely starting to get a little bit on.
Ja, ik ja. Oké.
Kom op. Ja, oké.
Ja, oké.
So we'll start to get set up now.
Klaar. Ik ga. Commando, ik ga. Commando, ik ga.
Klaar. Ik ga.
So we'll use the militiamen as a meat shield at the front.
Commando.
Not sure where my... Oh, they're just standing here. Never mind.
Commando. Juist. Oh, ik ga. Oké.
Ja.
So, interesting with the militiamen or any unit is if you select 6 or up to 6, they actually make a line, but if you select more than 6, then they form a little block. So it's interesting to remember when you're actually setting up your front line, is that you can set them up by grabbing them in groups of 6. It makes it a little bit easier. But again, this wouldn't be the traditional setup for Andes, because you'd be fighting a little bit more around Nats as well. But again, just for the purposes of today, this is how we're going to do it. Now, I'm going to chuck an envoy to the front as well. The envoys are annoying to control in a battle because they don't count as military units. So when you select, if you have the correct setup on, which doesn't select military and non-military units at once, you're not going to be able to move them unless you individually select them. But they're crap. They're just a little, again, a bit of a meat shield. Just to allow your more important units to stay alive and kill the enemy. Trying to get up, so I think we're missing one. Not sure where our other musketeer is. Oh, there he is. He's hiding in between the mass of the...
Commando, klaar.
5, 6. So our score is actually looking pretty poor this game, but we'll see how we go. Yep, I don't know how long that guy was there, but that's bad. We'll actually go for just 3 wars this game.
Juist. Ja.
So selecting 6 at a time. And then we just smash them in. Now the reason for doing this is obviously to not have them as bunched up as they otherwise probably would be. Because if the enemy has a whole lot of cannons, your squishy bunched up infantry units are going to get obliterated. So we'll move our control groups of Culves just to spread out our lines, and then chuck our horse artillery in between them. We obviously have Reuters, which we'll chuck behind. Now I typically like to use these guys as well as the halberdiers on the outskirts, just to help prevent Huss coming in behind or other cavalry coming in behind and obliterating your artillery, because obviously you want to keep them alive. Because if they're dead, they're not killing infantry. Yeah, so it very much depends on the setup, where if it's a choke point like this, where you don't have to worry about Huss coming in from around here, then I'll just put the halberdiers at the front. But if you're in a position like this, where the Huss could come from around here, or they could come from around here, that's when I'll typically like to, I guess, protect the little squishy babies inside the main component of your army, with the pointy boys on the outside, as well as the shooty boys also on the outside, but not as on the outside as the halbs. So that's pretty much it for Dutch. Unfortunately, because of the very small villager economy, It means they're not nearly as competitive as basically every other civilization, but they have a fairly unique playstyle which sets them apart from their opposition. Now you're definitely able to play against most civs and beat most civs if you play correctly and your opponent is not as good as you, but that goes for saying goes without saying, as that's the case with any civ. Even though I said the civ is bad, don't let that dissuade you from playing them. Play a civ because you want to and because you think they look fun. I think the Dutch are really cool. The whole bank mechanic is, I think, really interesting. It just sucks that their villager count is a little bit lower, or a great deal lower than every other civilization. We'll actually send this card as well before we forget. That'll tank our score a bit because it won't come in time, I don't think. But that's about it. If you have any further questions related to playing Dutch or playing any other civilization or any other just random questions you have for Age of Empires 3 Treaty, feel free to chuck them in the comments below. Or feel free to come by my Twitch and say hello and then chill out. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you've learned a thing or two. So we almost hit 200k there, just missed that unfortunately, but that's the general score you should be looking to go for. But yeah, I hope you learned a thing or two. Hopefully you're a better treaty player as a result of this, and I wish you the best of luck in playing the Dutch. So thank you for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day/night, and I'll catch you guys again another time. Bye.